Do you know what time it is? It's Supernatural Storytime. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark. Call from my doppelganger. It happened in early 2000 when I was working at a juvenile detention center in a small town in Oklahoma as a corrections officer. I was working nights at the time and went to work at 9 p.m. This one night when I arrived for work, my supervisor looked confused and asked me what I was doing there. I said, "I work tonight." And he said, "But they said you called in a few hours ago saying that you were sick." I was a bit confused and said, "It must have been someone else and they got the message wrong." After everyone else showed up for work that night, it was a bit more weird, but we carried on as usual and assigned everyone their places for the night, and I went to work in the control room where I usually worked. The control room is the center of the prison that has direct control over the cameras, doors, phones, and everything. After I relieved the guard on duty and settled in for the night, I looked at the message that said I called in. It said that I had called at 6:50 and said that I had gotten sick while out cleaning up after the storm. There had been a storm the night before, and it was a bit bad, but not anything that I had to go out to clean up. It was truly weird. The supervisor came into the control room about that time. He was also a friend of mine outside of work, and we started talking about it and how odd it was. I decided to call my wife at home and tell her about it while he was still settling in. And I picked up the phone and dialed it. After 2 rings, a man picked up the phone and with a raspy voice said, "Hello?" I did not know what to say for a few seconds. I looked at the phone to make sure I dialed the right number, and I had. After a few seconds, the person said, "Hello?" again in that same raspy voice. I said, "Hello, who is this?" "This is Taylor, who's this?" the person said. My head started spinning because my name is Taylor also. I said in almost a scream, "Where's Anne?" He said, "Anne's in bed, who is this?" I dropped the phone and told my supervisor to ring me out. I got to get home and took off towards the door. Behind me, I could hear Dave pick up the phone and say, "Hello?" followed soon after by "What the fuck?" rather loudly. I ran to my car and drove home faster than what was legal, my mind racing the entire time. I busted through the door and my wife was sitting there watching television and was shocked at me being home. I asked her who was there and she said no one had been there. After a rather long talk with my wife, I went to call back to the prison to tell them what was going on, and the phone was dead. I went back to work, and when I came in, Dave was acting weird and asked me, "How the hell am I doing this?" He told me that when I left, he picked up the phone and the person on the other end sounded like me. He kind of freaked out and hung up the phone. A minute later, as he could see my car leaving the parking lot, I had called back from home asking what the fuck was going on. He said that I was a bit irate and said I was sick and did not feel like playing these games and was telling him to stop prank calling me and hung up. After convincing him that I had no idea what was going on, we went back to work. Later I found out that the phone line for my area had been knocked down the night before by the storm. This is absolutely the strangest thing that has ever happened to me. A haunted basement. This story takes place when I was in high school. I attended a high school in a little town which is just south of Norman in Oklahoma. Everyone in this town knew about this abandoned house. Anyway, this house was a picture-perfect example of a haunted house. 2 stories, extremely old, and a rumor about a child being killed in a dryer or something along those lines. My best friend and I decided that we wanted to check it out, so one day after school we had his brother take us to it since we were 15 and didn't have a license. It was daylight when we went in, so visibility was still present. We walked in through the front door to an appalling scene of graffiti all over the walls and a rotting wood stench. We were definitely impressed and proceeded to go up the stairs. Once upstairs, we noticed a door that was locked or jammed shut, so I got the bright idea to kick it open. As soon as the door swung open, a rush of cold air came surging past us. Although it was strange, I didn't think much of it. So after we were done exploring the upstairs, we proceeded to explore the rest of the house and discovered a basement. We didn't go in. We just took notice of it and left due to the fact it was getting late and my mother wanted us home. Both my friend and his brother came home with me to stay the night. So later that night we decided to sneak out and explore the haunted house while it was dark to enhance the scary factor. So we set out once it was certain my parents were asleep and had headed for the house. Once we arrived to the house, it seemed to have an even more ominous appearance, probably due to the fact that it was pitch black and not a damn light within a mile. We headed inside and went straight for the basement with nothing more than a cell phone light for visibility. And no, it didn't have the flashlight app. Once we began our descent into the pitch black basement, an eerie feeling came over me. I would like to attribute that to something supernatural, but it was probably just me being a pussy. As we explored the basement, it became apparent that it was unusually large and filled with junk. One of the items that came to my attention was a dryer, because of the rumors I had heard before. Although it did seem coincidental, it was still a common household item and wasn't the only item that had been left there. So, nothing paranormal happened in the basement, and we decided to head back out and go home. This is where it got fucking weird. Right when we got into the main living room area, where the front door was, we all three heard an extremely loud noise. The only way I could describe this noise was a massive growl that seemed to be coming from the whole house, as if it were telling us to get the fuck out now. We darted through the front door in a mad dash for the car, probably breaking some type of world speed record. Halfway to the car, I ran right into a barbed wire fence and got my leg stuck. As I'm trying to pull my leg out without scratching it too much, my friend jumped onto the fence and shredded my leg. I honestly was too frightened to give a damn, so I just ripped it out and hauled ass to the car. We could not comprehend what had just taken place, but all we knew was that it was fucking epic. To this day, I have no real explanation for what could have made that dreadful roar. My first assumption was that it was just wind hitting the house. But for one, there was no wind. And two, that would not have produced the noise we heard. So, I still don't believe in ghosts or anything of that sort. But I was legitimately frightened like no other and have no explanation for what occurred. And, a few years later, some nut burnt down the entire house. The only thing left standing was the base of the house, and of course the basement underneath it. The apartment from hell. I recently moved out of my old apartment. There was something wrong with it. It was small, a 2-floor deal, kitchen and living room downstairs, a pair of tiny bedrooms and a bathroom upstairs. I took one bedroom, my brother took the other. The place seemed alright at first, but things started getting weird. I don't even know when they started. To be honest, they may have started the day we moved in. I just can't remember now. The first thing I noticed was the smells. There were good smells like cooking, but they'd come at odd hours of the night and in the early morning. They were strong enough to wake me up. Savory, meaty. I turned on the lights to check it out, but as soon as the lights came on, the smell vanished, just like that. I let it go the first few times. Could be something electrical, right? But it happened at least once a week, and the more I thought about it, the less it made sense. Sure, electrical bits can burn out and emit smells, but delicious smells, and only when the lights were off? That wasn't right. And I know what you're thinking. It's just the neighbors cooking. Makes sense, except our apartment was a self-contained unit that didn't share walls with any other apartments. Then the dreams started. At least, I hope they were dreams. My brother always had night terrors, but they got worse when we lived there, and I started having them too. I'd see things slither under my closet door, reaching for me, or the door would slowly open, or I'd see something glowing. Then I'd wake up and everything looked all right, but I didn't feel safe. I never had a fear of the dark, but I started wrapping myself up in my blanket. I know the joke, how nothing can get through the impenetrable blanket, but I swear it worked. Then came the roaches. I mean, they were always there, but they started acting weird. We easily killed hundreds while we lived there, so trust me when I say there were a lot of them. And most days we saw dozens, but some days they would just be gone. We'd go the whole day without seeing a single one. Then like clockwork, those nights we got the smells, it's like the roaches didn't want to be there when the smells came. I get why. Smell night, as we started calling it, and my brother noticed all these things too, so I know I'm not totally crazy. Smell night was when we got the worst nightmares. 5 Tuesdays ago was a smell night. It was the worst. I swear I opened my eyes, not just dreamed it, and something was there. Was over me, was touching me. Actually fucking touching me. I felt intensely hot, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. I felt completely constricted. I felt like I was going to die. Then my brother slammed his shoulder against my door. I jerked upright, suddenly free, gasping for air. He burst in so pale he seemed to glow in the near total darkness of my room. I swore to God something was in my fucking room, he said. This is totally fucked. We're leaving. Now. And we did. We left that night. We came back the next morning to get our stuff and hand in our key. We gladly paid the fee for leaving early. We grabbed as much stuff as we could get before nightfall and planned to come back the next day. But when we came back, there were no roaches. We left everything there and didn't return for it. Sure, it cost nearly $5,000 to replace our beds, couches, and TV, on top of all the other fees accrued, but we weren't going to be caught dead there at night ever again. I haven't had any nightmares since. The Cursed. When I was little, my great-grandmother used to tell me not to go into the woods near her house after dark. She lived on the Oklahoma-Texas border in a little town located about 2 hours from where I lived. She said that a cursed man lived in the woods, and that any child he found in the woods after dark was his for the taking. She called him the Tallow Man. He was a German candle maker who lived in this town 300 years ago, she would tell me, who was cursed by a shaman of the Wichita Indian tribe that used to live in this state. One day he killed 2 Wichita children that stole some of the animal fat he used to make his candles. But he didn't just kill them. Oh no. He butchered the bodies and used their fat for candles. The whole town knew and tried to hide what happened, but the smell of the burning fat carried all the way to the tribe living near the town. That night, a great wind blew across the town, throwing open window shutters and doors, snuffing out all of the fires and candles and lanterns. And the people heard a voice, carried on the wind, say, "You who killed our children, we curse you. As you burn their bodies for light, this we take from you. May your eyes never see by the sun or moon or stars. You will only see by the candles you make. You take comfort in the house where you killed our kin. This we take from you. May you forever wander the forest and the plains, never to know rest or comfort. You crafted your fires with the fat of our children, so your children we take from you. The only tallow you shall have is from the children of the settlers you killed and butchered. You will live forever with this curse and be a curse upon your people." The townspeople all shuddered and hid in their homes as the wind raged around them. The sound of wood tearing and walls crashing echoed all through the night, but none were brave enough to leave their homes. At last, when the sun rose, the people left their homes. The house of the candle maker was destroyed. Nothing left but splinters and broken logs. The candle maker's family was nowhere to be found. The town decided to never speak of what happened and went on about their lives. But 2 days later, one of the butcher's 5 children disappeared. The last of the butchers saw him. He was taking the unusable meat to dispose of it out in the woods. That night, soft yellow lights were seen out in the woods, like candle flames moving through the trees. The butcher went out with his 2 oldest boys to look for the child, the shaman's curse fresh in his mind. He was found the next morning on the edge of the woods, covered in blood, holding the butchered corpses of his 2 oldest sons. Their bodies had been stripped of flesh and fat. Only the skin on their faces was left. She would always stop here and look in my eyes, making sure I was paying attention. The townsfolk woke from their sleep that night to a terrible smell. the same smell the candles from the Indian children made when lit. The people stumbled out of their homes into the town square, where 3 candles were lit. Carved into the red and yellow tallow of the candles were the names of the butcher's children, the 3 boys that had been killed. That's always where she would stop. I'll tell you more tomorrow. I've scared you enough for tonight. And every night after she tucked me in, I'd lie awake and stare out of my window into the woods, waiting for a glimpse of candles in the trees. Until the night, my vigilance paid off. The second part of this tale would always be told to me on the front porch of her house. Facing the open plains, we'd wait until the sun was setting and the stars had begun to come out, and she would sit in her rocking chair with only the light from a couple of kerosene lamps to see by. She'd make me blackberry tea while she sipped on something with whiskey in it, strong enough I could smell it 10 feet away. After the townsfolk discovered the candles in the town square, many of them still did not believe in the curse of the Wichita. Some believed that the Indians had killed the children and wanted to bring destruction on the tribe. Others wanted to sue for peace. In the midst of their bickering, the butcher stepped forward and knelt in front of the burning candles. Their bickering and squabbling seemed like it would not stop until they heard a scream that chilled them all to the bone. Again came the scream, the townspeople all turning to find the butcher on his knees, pointing to the entrance of the gathering. In the road stood something with the shape of a man, cut out of the night, illuminated by the candles burning upon his shoulders and head. In his palms were dancing flames, shedding light on his upturned face, his eyes closed to the heavens, closed to God. The townsfolk watched, paralyzed, as he lowered his head and then cried out in horror as he gazed upon them. The candle maker stood naked before them, his body stained by blood and fat. He had torn the eyes from his head, stuffing the empty sockets with his monstrous candles. The tallow ran down his face like horrible tears as the wicks burned. Time itself had flinched away from this devil, this horror. This moment was frozen into the souls of the town. Slowly the candlemaker turned around and began walking through the town, singing softly into the air, his voice, the sound of flesh writhing in the fires of hell, of children burning and dying. Don't ever go into the woods at night. They watched as he faded into the darkness, the light of his candles never losing their brightness. So entranced were they by the candlemaker that no one paid any attention as the mayor's door opened and his little girl crept through the crowd, her name whispered on the wind. No one noticed until she was on the edge of the town, but by then it was too late. Just as the mayor was shaking himself from the fear that had gripped him, a new one took its place. Though he called out her name and ran to her, it was to be in vain. As his child turned to face him, from the shadows came the tallow man. In a flash of light both were gone, the darkness quickly filling the space where they had been standing. By this time, all light from the sun would be gone. My tea would be cold in my hands, only half drunk. Grandma would have finished her drink, her eyes slightly glazed as the alcohol took effect. We would sit in silence for a while, listening to the crickets chirp and the coyotes yip, staring at the empty plains before us. None moved until the daylight came. The people slowly gathered around the sobbing mayor and his wife, wondering what condolences they could offer, what words of comfort could ever be enough to assuage their fear and their heartache. A posse was formed by the men of the town, led by the resident priest, to hunt down the devil in their midst. From dawn to dusk they combed the woods, turning over every log, sending their dogs into every hole large enough to hide a man. The wreckage of the candlemaker's house was burned to ashes and sifted through, but no one could find anything. As the sun was setting and the fear of the tallow man began to stalk the night, the mayor's daughter was found, strung up at an oak tree at the back of his property. Her throat was slit and her skin had been flayed. All the yellow fat had been cut away, leaving only white bone and red meat. Without fail, every night, my grandmother would tell the second part. This is where she would stop. And out on the plains we would see candlelight creeping slowly to the house. The wind would carry words to my ears in a voice like roasting children. Don't ever go into the woods at night, or in moonlight walk the plains. Time to go inside, little ones, time for you to sleep. She would take me by the hand and lead me inside, tucking me into bed. Dream of sweet things and do not think of the tallow man. Tomorrow I will finish this tale, and then he will come for you. Wasn't she a sweet grandmother? Too Many Hauntings. My mom, grandma, cousins, aunts, uncles, pretty much everyone on my mom's side of the family believes in ghosts. Hardcore. They ghost hunt, Ouija, I don't know. My mom reads palms, tarot, she does people's numbers too. She used to always talk about having dreams of her past lives, having dreams of dead soldiers trying to communicate with their loved ones. You know, just crazy mom stuff. I do personally believe in all that stuff. It is how I was raised, and has always hit home with me. Anyway, the first house I lived in was cursed. It was in a small town in Oklahoma, right next to a main street, and to the right of a cow field. To the right of the house, directly next door, was a woody hill. Just a dark hill with lots of trees that led to the bottom of my backyard. And my backyard also had a large hill, and the woods began at the bottom. Of course, I didn't know it was haunted at the time. I probably didn't even believe in ghosts either. My mom moved in with my dad before I was born. He had a young daughter from a previous marriage who was around 13 at the time. We'll call her Jay. My dad wasn't a very good dad. If she messed up even a little, he'd beat her. So my mom says. She also wasn't allowed to have anyone over after school until my mom got home. One day, when my mom did get home, she walked past the stairs. From the bottom of the stairs, you can look right up into the bathroom mirror and see a little bit of the other wall inside. Jay was standing in front of the mirror doing what young teen girls do, and a girl was standing next to her. My mom, pissed, asked Jay why she had her friend over. Jay, confused, looked downstairs and said nobody was with her. When my mom looked back, the girl was gone. Another time, a few years after that incident, I was watching TV late at night in the living room. I was about 6 or 7, and I felt something watching me from my parents' doorway. When I turned to look, there was a man, which looked to be about 7 feet tall. He was all black, no face, what most people call a shadow person. I, of course, at the time didn't know that, so I just assumed it was my dad. But when I said something and he didn't reply, I knew that I was very wrong. I rolled over to face the couch cushions and forced myself to sleep. One time, it was again late at night. I crept downstairs to my parents' room and crawled onto the foot of the bed. My eyes had only been closed for 10 seconds when I heard voices coming from the bathroom. On the wall, I saw a shadow of a small woman and 2 more shadows of a boy and a girl. I don't remember what they talked about. I just know that I was so scared I couldn't go to sleep. Ended up having to stay up all night listening to those voices. I also had one of the scariest dreams I've ever had living in that house. All I remember is that it was dark outside, and me and Jay were playing near the edge of the woody hill. We often raced down the hill with other kids, but since you had to wear shoes, we mostly used the hill in the backyard. So in my dream, she told me to run down the woody hill as fast as I could. When I got to the bottom, a pile of dead branches and leaves was drawing me towards it. I wasn't scared until I got close and heard one of the scariest laughs ever to pierce my eardrums. The next day, my friend came over to play and mentioned the same dream to me. Weird, I know, but needless to say, any time we went into the woody hills was to investigate what we called the witch laugh. When I was about 11, we moved into a house a block away from that one. It was a brand new house in the newest housing addition of the small town. It was a very nice 4-bedroom. My sister and me, we had our own bedrooms. We used to go to a local restaurant every Thursday night because it was only 99 cents for a kid's meal. After that, we'd often go and pick out something at the mall. One night, we all picked out those bead things to put in your doorway. Either the first or second night, they were all hung up on our doors. Mine moved like someone had come in. I thought it was my cat, but when she never jumped on the bed, I got scared. I rolled over to the wall and forced myself to sleep. The next morning, my sister claimed the same thing had happened to her, only someone had actually sat on her bed. Another time, around this time my mom was working in Nebraska and was only home on the weekends, so we were all left at home with my dad, who doesn't believe in any of this. I was at the breakfast table doing homework. The table looked right out the back door into the back porch. Something caught my eye, forcing me to look up to a misty woman in a blue dress with brown hair walking straight to the door. I jumped up to run and tell my dad. He said I was just seeing things, so I never mentioned it again. I know I saw her more than once. I can only remember this one time, though. I also used to stay up in this house to watch TV, and on this one night I was up watching So Weird. I don't know if anyone remembers that show. The chair I was cuddled up in faced the dining room, and another couch was in the living room. I kept hearing a faint knocking, so I kept looking in the direction it was coming from. The last time I looked up, a hooded figure, all black, like a shadow, just a head taller than the couch, slowly walked behind it and disappeared at the end. My scary ass turned to face the wall and forced myself to sleep. Shortly after, I ended up moving with my mom to Nebraska, leaving my sister with our dad. I was doing bad in school and was very depressed at this time. It wasn't a good time for anyone, actually. Anyway, we lived in one of the nicest apartment complexes there, up on top of a very steep hill. The first night I was there, I was up late watching TV, and I felt something sitting next to me. I was scared, just at that, but then an unexplained breathing began. I couldn't see or feel anything, just hear it. Not long after that, my sister came to stay up there with us for the summer. We stayed up late watching TV, just being young girls enjoying a summer break. One time it was about 2 a.m. and we were up, being pretty loud. I did something to make my sister laugh louder than normal, and all of a sudden a loud noise like something heavy was being dragged across the kitchen counter. We jumped, slowly got up to look, and discovered my mom's mixing bowls, which were heavy clay bowls. The three of them were stacked into one another. They had all moved all the way across the counter. That was really the scariest thing that happened. But no matter what the breathing was, it was always around. The cabinets in the kitchen always opened and closed, or the dishes inside would get moved around. When me and my mom finally moved back to Oklahoma and back in with my dad, they had moved to another new house. I only have one story there, and that's this. One night, me and my sister were up late, and when we heard the bathroom door close, we figured it was someone from the family using the bathroom. About an hour later, my mom came into the room, upset the bathroom light was on, the door was locked and closed, and nobody was in there. We were confused. We hadn't left the room. When she finally opened the door, the smell that came out was one of the foulest smelling smells I've ever smelled, and it was stuck in the bathroom for a few days after. Shortly after moving back in with my dad, him and my mom got a divorce and we moved around a lot. We ended up back in Oklahoma in a nice house in a not small town. This house wasn't haunted, but I was a bad kid and ended up moving out right after turning 18. I ended up getting pregnant, graduating high school, and moving into my own apartment with my baby's father. Around this time, my mom had moved into a new house, which she and my sister and my little brother were claiming was haunted. I was also skeptical at this time of ghosts, since my son's father didn't really believe in the same stuff. His family was kind of religious. I don't really know, I just know his family was a little off. However, we didn't work out and I ended up having to move in with my mom. The first week I was there, I was heartbroken, so I didn't do much but sulk on the couch while my son learned to crawl and pull himself up to stand. Once I started getting used to living with my mom again, I started experiencing what my mom and siblings were talking about. I was once told that sometimes when you see a shadow or something move in the corner of your eye and you turn to see but nothing is there, that it's a spirit, a ghost, whatever. So this one night I was up late in the living room watching TV, and I started getting this really bad feeling. Not like something bad was going to happen, but that something that was very evil was watching me. When I stood up to walk to my room, a dark shadow sitting behind me moved. I turned to look. Nothing. I walked as fast as I could to the room, feeling it follow me. I walked to my bed where my son was asleep, got into bed, and turned my camera with the flash on. I scanned the room, and all I could see were orbs. The presence was still watching me. A couple of nights later, everything was cool. I was lying in bed with my son, drifting off to sleep, and then the atmosphere got heavy, making me feel really uneasy. I felt something from the doorway watching me again. Still facing towards the room, my son behind me and between the wall, I closed my eyes. Not even a second later, my sister called my name. I opened my eyes, but she was still asleep. So slowly, I rolled over and faced the wall, again forcing myself to sleep. Every house I've been in has always felt as if someone was watching me, like someone is attached to my family. And I think it all started with the first house we lived in. But I am afraid that I'll never be able to outrun it. That every place I go, every house I move into, I will still be haunted.